Hello everybody and welcome to another celebrity face reading. My name is Taylor and today we will be looking at none other than the tiny faced man himself, Charlie Kirk. Now this guy is a very big political influencer in American politics, especially on the conservative side of things. He's well known of course for his campus advocacy through his group Turning Point USA, and nowadays he's especially famous for doing these change my mind style question and answer sessions with liberal and left-wing students where he totally owns them with facts and logic. It's the same sort of conservative gatekeeping kind of stuff that we've seen time and time again in American politics, but Charlie Kirk seems to take it to the next level. I see this guy as a true political professional, which is why he's so interesting to me. That and his face is just weird, and you guys thought so too. This video is being done in response to a comment by Naraki Kiza. Thank you for leaving that comment, and if you leave a comment under this video telling me which celebrity you want me to do a face reading of next, you may just get to choose the topic of my next video. So without any further ado, let's get right into it. Now we're going to start off by taking a look at his phenotype, which is the physical expression of his genetic inheritance, his ancestry, and his race. Now he has a somewhat discordant look. It's obviously rather odd, even from a racial level. He doesn't clearly express one single phenotypic type. Now he's clearly brachycephalic, that is, his head is broad proportional to its length, so he has sort of an alpinid look there, somewhat continental European, but it's definitely not a pure alpinid. Many of his features actually seem to be of the Celtic Nordid type, which is the Nordid type particular to the British Isles. Now this is especially interesting because the British Isles are pretty much clear of alpinids. They have some broad-headed Borby types there, but by and large that alpinid element is missing there. And so this look that Charlie has is not an entirely unfamiliar one, but it is an extremely, and I would say exclusively, American look. Alpinids and Celtic Nordids don't really mix in the wild, so to speak, of Europe, because of course alpinids are limited to the continent, Celtic Nordids are limited to the British Isles, and never the twain shall meet. Except of course when, say, British Celtics come to America and they're followed soon afterwards by German or French alpinids, then they meet, mix, and you get the Charlie Kirks of the world. So a bit of an odd look, but we'll give him some credit here. He's got a very uniquely American phenotype. I'm sure he would like that as a pro-American rah-rah conservative. Alright, with his phenotype out of the way, we're going to get into his physiognomy and personality, starting off with his side profile, which will tell us about his temperament and inborn characteristics. As you can see here, he's got a high forehead, chin that's level with said forehead, and an obtuse angle to his jawline. Those are all traits of the choleric type, including even the kind of browner undertones to his skin that's also a choleric trait, as well as his body type. This means that he's willful, bossy, and commanding. He's very energetic. He can get a lot of work done. He loves working, needs very little sleep, kind of no nonsense. May come across a bit uncaring or unempathetic at times, but that's just because he's so focused on his work. He's a positive pessimist, which means that he very clearly and acutely sees all the problems of the world, but this doesn't discourage him. It actually encourages him to solve these problems. But he's not a completely pure choleric. His forehead is pretty high, but it does have a significant slope to it. This is more of a sanguine forehead. This means that his intellect is a bit quicker and a bit more impulsive and impatient. Now, not to slander the guy or anything right off the bat, but I'm reminded of another person I recently did a reading of who also had a choleric temperament with a sloping sanguine forehead, and that was of course Adolf Hitler. Also someone very famous for their political advocacy, public speaking, speaking ability, and whatnot. But as we'll see, Mr. Kirk has a very different personality on the whole from that. However, one very significant trait that they do share in common, other than their temperament, is their face shape, which stands for their personality archetype. They both generally have a Venus face shape. That's that diamond or heart face shape, and that means that Charlie Kirk, like Hitler, is very concerned with social causes, with loving and being loved. Charlie Kirk wants to bring warring parties to the negotiating tables and make deals. You'll see that Donald Trump in his youth actually had a Venus face shape because he was the big deal maker. Now he has more of a warlike Mars face shape. That happens a lot to people as they age and their face sags down. They become more Martian and warlike. But Charlie Kirk for now still has that Venus face shape. I think his Venus elements express themselves first in advocating for his ideas and wanting to get people to talk, get people discussing, doing all these big events. I mean, Venus bringing warring parties to the negotiating table. I mean, going on to Gavin Newsom's podcast. I think Charlie Kirk is always a guy to reach out an olive branch. In most cases, he does have his limits, and those are very calculated, as we'll get more into later. But his face is not a pure, perfect Venus shape. It's a bit asymmetrical. His left side shows a bit more of a Saturnian element, a bit more of a trapezoid shape. This means that by nature and on the inside, he is much more reserved, meticulous, diligent, very detail focused and very oriented towards order and making order. The Saturn face shape is the most natural face shape for the choleric temperament, and so like the choleric temperament as a whole, it's very work focused, very serious, very no nonsense. And so we can see that in his personal life and in private, he's a much more serious person than he puts on in public. He's very work focused. I imagine he's probably some kind of workaholic. But then we can see the right side of his face does have that mostly Venus shape, but it's a bit squarer, or rather more rectangular. That shows an element of the Mars face shape, which stands for the warrior archetype. That means that his public persona is a good deal more aggressive, assertive, and combative than he is on the whole. No surprise there, he's basically a professional debater. Last thing on his face shape is that if you look up at his forehead, he has a very prominent widow's peak. This is a great sign. It is a sign that he has a lot of charm, and if you believe in that sort of thing, good luck. And that has clearly done him well, as his organization and his work is pretty big and successful. But why has he succeeded in the way that he has? What is it that makes him tick, and why does he do the things that he does? That's what we're here to answer. We're going to start out with his facial features and go through and figure out what's motivating him and how he does the things that he does. We're going to start off with his most infamous facial feature, his face itself, specifically its size. It's so tiny. His face is so little and itty bitty small. Why is that? Well, the interface shows sensitivity. The bigger the interface, the more sensitive and reactive someone is. If someone has a real small interface, like Charlie Kirk, or like somebody like Bill Clinton, that means that they are far more aloof, detached, and stress resistant. They can very easily compartmentalize and detach from situations and sort of be of two minds, be doing one thing, but mentally off somewhere else, so they aren't taken over by stress. I think this tiny interface should set off alarm bells immediately, because that means that he is a person who is very easily able to detach from a situation and, like I said, be of two minds, possibly do a lot of doublespeak. This is probably not that unusual for a professional political actor and political propagandist, for lack of a better word, but it's something that should be noticed. And I think ironically, the extreme smallness of his interface may be a great advantage to him, because it insulates him from the sort of stressors that normally take other people down, especially when combined with that choleric temperament. It's going to make his work ethic wonderful, especially when you combine it with those deep set eyes that show that he's a calculating person who generally thinks before he speaks. But he's not entirely without reactivity. He isolates himself from the outside world and from stressors, but once you get to him, he is somewhat reactive. That's because the bridge of his nose is very narrow, which stands for sensitivity, and it has a prominent bump, which stands for reactivity. So once you get in past that tiny interface that is able to block things out, compartmentalize and cope, and really get to him, he's not going to have a good time. I mean, you can look at how he reacted to getting owned by that debate kid at Cambridge, I think it was, or when a caller asked him about Nick Fuentes and his face started twitching like he was a robot glitching out. Weird stuff. So far, not looking too good for Charlie Kirk, and it gets even worse when you look at his features related to communication. Now, he's a professional communicator, but nothing in his face says that. He's got a tiny mouth, which means that he's quiet and reserved by nature. He's not an extrovert. He's very introverted. He also has thin lips, which means he's not expressive, especially that upper lip, quite thin, which shows that when he's communicating, he's not telling you what he truly thinks or feels deep down. Now, you can make that work sometimes if you have a prominent Cupid's bow, which is the Venus lip that shows that your communication style is smooth talking and seductive, very silver-tongued. His is not. He has a weak Cupid's bow. He has a sun-shaped upper lip, which shows that his communication style is cold, detached, and emotionally distant. If he wants to smooth talk someone or convince someone, he has to either think about it a lot and calculate it out, or just follow a script, which we can see he does in a lot of his debate performances. These are very clearly pre-rehearsed, written out, push-button responses that he pulls out for the typical liberal arguments. And why does he need to do that? Well, look at the space between his tragus and his antitragus. It's tiny. That shows a lack of good speaking ability. Alright, so he's not by nature a great communicator. Why is he a professional communicator then, and how does he manage to pull it off? Well, there's a few different factors going into here. One is the fact that in spite of his lack of speaking ability, he's drawn towards that world. He has a very strong social orientation. Look at his upper eyelids. Even though his eyes are deep set, we can tell that he has relatively thick upper eyelids, which shows a strong need for intimacy and connection with other people. This is further reinforced by his weird gummy smile. Look at that right there. Now, there are several variants of a meme that have been floating around the internet for a few years that say something along the lines of, girls with gums like this are always married or always have a fiance, right? And I've noticed similar things in my own life. They have a certain vibe about them. That's because people with little teeth and very prominent gums are desperate for love and affection. They worry about not being loved enough. And so with women, this expresses itself as leaping into a marriage at the first sign of approval and affection, and for a guy, it looks like becoming a professional political pundit. If we want to continue with the line of thought that girls with gums like this always have a fiance, I will say that sometimes it does seem like Charlie Kirk acts like Trump is his fiance, or even abusive husband, always making excuses for him, running cover for him, and it is probably his job, he is probably getting paid for it, but I do think that he does have a genuine affection for and connection with Trump. And this isn't just a dysfunctional coping mechanism, it's part of his natural disposition. Look at his ears, they lie really close to his skull. He's a very dependent person. He's not an independent thinker or doer at all. He's very dependent on these social networks that he's built up, whether personal or professional. And look at his ears again, the middle third bulges out, which shows that he has a strong interest in social and emotional pursuits, more so than the intellectual or even material ones. So he's socially oriented, but again, he's not a good communicator. Why did he keep going through with it? Well, he's a stubborn person. Look at his eyebrows. They lie straight across his brow, and the bottom of his earlobes are very flat. Those are both strong indicators of stubbornness. All right, he wanted to connect with people, he wanted to be socially involved, he wanted to work for some big social cause that he believed in and be a fighter and advocate for it, and he was stubborn enough to go through with it. So how is he able to thread the needle on being able to communicate when it's not his nature? Well, that's because for him, as I mentioned previously, it's all an intellectual exercise. It's all very calculated and within his mind. He's not a stupid or unintelligent person. He has straight eyebrows, which means that he is a logical, rational thinker who makes decisions based on the facts. He's got deep set eyes, which means that he's very calculating and withdrawn, thinks before he speaks, and he's got a straight nose generally, which means that his general disposition is steady, cool-headed, and rational. Now, the final ingredient for Charlie Kirk's career success is his action ability. It's not all intellectual for him. The debating part is, but the actual organizing of TPUSA and all of his events and his collaborations, that requires a very action-oriented persona, and you can see that he has that. Of course, that sanguine forehead gives him a bit more of a pep in his step in terms of acting quickly and organizing. That more Martian rectangular right side of his face gives him a much more aggressive, action-oriented, ready to fight, ready to jump into things sort of public persona. And on his facial features, you see that he has short eyebrows. That means that he likes to act. He's not too much of a planner and he wants to jump into things. And his nose is relatively short too. I'd say in general medium in length, but relative to the Celtic phenotype elements he has there, it's a pretty short nose, which means that he's quite action oriented. Not too much of a deep thinker, not too much of a contemplative person, more so somebody who wants to go out and do things. And so that's my take on Charlie Kirk. I think that on the whole, he's a pretty Venusian person. He likes communicating, he likes working for social causes, he likes networking with people and bringing people together and hashing things out, whether that is him debating liberals on the virtue of conservative values, or him working for his bosses, which is the donor class, to try and pitch their ideas to the average American voter and convince the American voter that actually corporate tax cuts and wars for Israel are as American as mom, baseball, and apple pie. And he's able to pull this off because he has those two sides working for him. He has the left side of his face and the more choleric side of him, which is much more disciplined, calculated, intellectual underneath. And then on the surface, he has this much more aggressive, impulsive, action-oriented side of him that is able to get into these debates, be more action-oriented, and really put in the work for himself and his brand and his group. So that concludes my physiognomy analysis of Charlie Kirk. If you want to learn more about this topic or get a face reading done for yourself or someone you know, message me on my website, link is in the description. This has been Taylor from Prosopa Insights, reminding you to always judge a book by its cover. Thank you for watching.